All right, folks, how you doing? This is Damascus and Cirencester Part 1. Disclaimer, of course. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. So once again, we're going back to The Great Deception by Thomas Beaumont. So we begin this chapter, though I think it's actually an appendix, before Babylon or Jerusalem. Although Damascus was a most important city from the very earliest times preceding the coming of Abram, and long before Babylon emerged or Jerusalem became the capital of the Judeans, comparatively little has passed down to us regarding its history, and such as exists is scrappy. It must have been the centre of a flourishing and important community long before Jerusalem came to the fore. In the earliest history of Israel, it was the capital of Syria and continued to play a great part throughout. Settling in the west. When Abram led his followers from the very north, namely from Ur-of-the-Chaldees, Orkney, with the intention of settling in the west, namely in Mizraim, Egypt, or Philistia, he made his way first to Damascus. In such movements, we must always recollect that in those distant days, great areas were yet terra incognita, mainly primeval forests inhabited by wild forest beasts, including lions, bears, savage boars, and wild cattle, as well as serpents, and that communications could only be contrived by a series of such highways as existed. The Great North Road. So it indicates in this matter that the great highway from the north, Caithness, to the south led to Damascus, and this same highway was the present Great North Road, once known as Ermine Street after the god Hermes, which would proclaim its origin as from the Druid centre of Ur, or Samos of Thrace. Plato in the Critias, in his description of Atlantis, gives details of the many canals throughout the great plain of the island, and indirectly indicates roads by stating that the Atlanteans possessed war chariots for such necessitated roadways, prehistoric thoroughfares. Hermes, among other activities, was the deity protecting roads and traffic, and in both Greece and Britain his torso in stone was placed on main crossroads, whereby many roads were named after him. Damascus conducted considerable trade in both east and west and by sea. In the west with Gades and other cities where again roads are implied, as also the case with Tyre, Portland, and Sidon, Seaton. It may be a curious fact to some, but London possessed many prehistoric thoroughfares, which either emanated from or passed through it, all in one direction, than any other city in Britain. The Syrian and Babylonian god. In the time of St. Paul, there was the thoroughfare in Damascus called Strait, so named still as it passes through Lincoln to the north, and otherwise called Ermine Street. These factors afford evidence of the importance of prehistoric London as the commercial centre of the ancient British world. Another important centre was where Cirencester stands in the area of the Great Plain. The name accorded to it, Damascus, is a Latinized version, for the Hebrew was Damasek, and various theories to account for it have been advanced, one being that it was a corruption of Tammuz or Thammuz, the Syrian and Babylonian god. Father Thames, or Thames. Certainly Tammuz, described as the son of deep water, otherwise of Poseidon, might be the origin of the name Father Thames, or Thames. How do you say it really? It's been ages since I've been to London. the Thames, Father Thames. Yeah, that's how you say it. In the region called variously Thamna or Thamnas or Thamnatha by Josephus, all relating to the region of the River Thames or the Thames Valley, with which Damascus has the closest interest as part of its original territories as far as Cirencester, the border of Syria in the west. It is one of the interesting survivals to students of antiquity that whilst place names varied considerably through the centuries and often underwent exchange of masters, that certain names have contrived to survive all vicissitudes. The Great Plain at Gades. The name Thamnas seems to be related to river god Tammuz or Thammuz. Among the ancient relics of London was discovered a life-size figure in marble of its river god, the head and torso of Hellenistic or Syrian type, found concealed deep in the mud at Walbrook, one of the two rivers which flowed through Londinium, like the two rivers of Damascus. Damascus lay in the eastern extremity of the region, later named Coal Syria, which traditionally stretched from the beginning of the Great Plain at Gades in the west to the Euphrates, the North Sea in the east. In Basham ruled Og or Abram. In Coal Syria were such districts as Basham adjoining a part of Gilead, the chalk country, where of old in Bashan ruled Og, a name given to Abram. To modernize these areas, Bashan incorporated much of the present Gloucestershire, and Thamnas, the Thames Valley, lay east of it. Samson's adopted city, called Timnath, a variation of Thames, lay in Bashan and corresponds with Cricklade on the upper Thames, which yet bears the name of St. Samson as a secondary description. Bashan was from the earliest times a part of the territories of the Philistines and Egyptians, otherwise Mizraim, where Abram, by strength of arms, established his power. It was most fertile country, noted for its oaks, its bulls, kine, and rams or sheep. So there we have a map of it on the right-hand side from Google Earth, and what it generally looks like on the left. Certainly a very fertile country. The chalk hills of Gilead. I couldn't resist putting that picture in on the right. Bordered on the east by the chalk hills of Gilead, it stretched north to Worcestershire, where stood Samaria, to the border of Gadara, as far as the city of Sukkoth, later called Scythiopolis, the present little township of Sherston between Bristol and Malmesbury. Malmesbury, I think that's how you say it. North eastwards, it reached Cirencester long before Babylon rose to prominence. Damascus exercised great political power over these parts in the region of Saron, where stood the city named Heliopolis in the Greek. And here on the right, we've got a cameo from Bill Clinton. Anyway, the land of Eden. So in later days, after the original downfall of Egypt, Damascus possessed considerable influence in the land of Eden, Somerset, and probably largely influenced the trade between the two, for at the mouth of the Bristol Avon lay Gades, also named Tarshish, with its Decapolis, including Scythopolis, Sherston, Gadara, Clifton, Philadelphia, originally Rabbath Ammon or Bath, and other places of early importance. The Wars of Damascus. So when we consider the wars in which Damascus was involved with her neighbours, they point to its geographical situation. King David defeated the Damascenes near the Euphrates, where do you get these names? Hadadazar later went to recover his lands from David, 2 Samuel 8:3, that a region abutting on the North Sea. That is a region abutting on the North Sea, excuse me. Again, in the time of Jehu, king of Israel, Hazael, king of Syria, at Damascus captured Ramoth Gilead, 2 Kings 9:14-15. Ramoth Gilead, or Ramah, adjoined Avebury and Hebron, Barbary Castle, before the rise of Babylon. So King Hazael smote Israel in Gilead and Bashan, 2 Kings 10:32-3, and for some 60 years Damascus still possessed them, for we find Amos prophesying that Baal would break the bar of Damascus and cut off the inhabitants from the plain of Avon or Avon, Amos 1:5, and who then ruled in Eden. Therefore Damascus was predominant at that time as far as Somerset, and also over Devon and Cornwall, for we learn that later its king made the Idumean king Aretas ruled over much of Coele-Syria. Josephus describes Aretas, king of Edom, as an Arabian, but Arabia is merely a translation of the Hebrew word Arab, meaning the West. So now, according to Beaumont, the Arabs didn't exist either. It's quite unreal with him. There was no other Arabia in those days. Well, according to Beaumont, there wasn't. If these problems were given the attention they merit in trying to resolve the history of the past and its relation to Britain, it would reveal that Damascus exercised political power over practically all the south of England, and before the rise of Babylon stretched as far north as the Humber. The Syrians and Egyptians were the two ruling communities in opposition and were frequently at grips in regard to their boundaries. Again, when Beaumont says there was no Arabia in those days, that's Beaumont's opinion. It's not necessarily my opinion. Beaumont likes to make these grand sweeping statements sometimes. It is what it is. So, land of the Philistines. Dorset alone in the south seems to have been independent, but that was Phoenicia with the great cities of Tyre and Sidon, with which Damascus carried on considerable commerce. In the records of Egypt, her eastern frontier was protected by Pelusium, originally Philistine Ashdod, which lay to the north of Hebron, and Ramoth Gilead, as discovered by Dr. Lepsius, the painstaking German Egyptologist, who was constantly at a loss to discover any of these territories in the present Egypt. And again, we only have Beaumont's word for that. Whether that's true or not, it's not for me to say. The area first occupied by Abram when he led his Hebrews south was in the eastern parts of Mizraim, land of the Philistines, who were the Egyptians, whom he subdued. The fortress of Hebron, Avebury. It explains why Manetho, the Egyptian historians, in describing the invasion of the cattlemen, Hyksos he terms them, when Abram erected his fortress of Hebron, in the Egyptian tongue Avaris, now Avebury, says that the invader selected a strategic post whence he could dominate the Egyptians on the one side and hold Syria in check on the other, for Hebron was near the Syrian border, as all this region was originally under the appellation of Gilead, the chalk country, as is Wiltshire, the region concerned. In the time of Amos, as seen in his lament, Damascus had seized these very parts, and the frontier city of Ashdod. The mention of Cirencester as originally the frontier city of Ashdod, later Pelusium, through which Assyrians, Syrians, and Babylonians in turn had to fight their way when invading Egypt, indicates its important strategic site, although it stood for more than that. The necessity of an invader to overthrow this fortress first is explained by the fact that it controlled the highways from the north to south and east to west. And when in ancient days and much later battles were fought mainly by warriors and chariots, the importance of such a fortress is evident. These highways indeed isolated the various peoples almost as though they dwelt on islands and communicated with one another by channels. So Ramoth, Gilead, and Ashdod, Pisgah. The regions in between, consisting of great forests, thick woodlands, moors, or swamps, absolutely forbade wheeled traffic. It may be claimed with confidence, as the accumulation of evidence has completely proved, that Avebury in North Wiltshire was the biblical Hebron, and Ramoth Gilead, so also was Cirencester, beyond known as Ashdod, Pisgah, the stream, was the specific name given to a certain area beyond the chalk highlands of Gilead, and explained by the Marlborough Downs, termed the mountains of Abarim in the Old Testament, when the Israelites had gathered together in the time of Moses like a swarm of bees on the border of Moab, now the county of Berkshire.
That is why I was calling on all of you to end the Berkshire turf wars. There's been enough brothers slain.
Marlborough Downs. So here we can see the map of the Marlborough Downs as they are today. So thank you very much for watching. Parts 2 and 3 should be out in the next few weeks. Feel free to leave your comments below, and see you next time.